Happy Friday, everybody. Sam Shapiro back here with more of your Heat latest on FanArc. Don't forget to drop a like on this video and, of course, subscribe for great daily content all surrounding Miami Heat culture Monday through Friday right here. I'm going to dive back into the blockbuster trade that would send Karl-Anthony Towns to the Miami Heat in a 5-team trade deal, also kind of reworking the Milwaukee Bucks and the New York Knicks and even the Jazz and the Spurs as well, kind of that I was talking about in yesterday's episode. Now today, one of the biggest points that I meant to touch on that I figured I would mention more in this episode is I feel like Karl-Anthony Towns would definitely be worth Miami's investment, specifically them sending Wiggins, Rozier, and a plethora just drafts, really draft power to Milwaukee in exchange for basically getting Karl-Anthony Towns, because Karl-Anthony Towns is a former Kentucky Wildcat. And as you know, Miami, quite honestly, has quietly become the University of Kentucky Wildcats in the NBA to some extent. Pat Riley, also a former Kentucky Wildcat, has just drafted a plethora of players from that program that, quite honestly, now are really making a difference on Miami. That being Bam Adebayo and Tyler Herro being the two guys that really, in terms of quality stars that Miami's been able to hang on to since the Big Three's departure, has kind of built this team around. It almost kind of seems like a perfect Cinderella story to add another Kentucky Wildcat to the mix. So I just think, given how the three Wildcats, or the three former Wildcats, would all gel together on the floor, although none of them really played together at the same time, going through similar programs together and then now playing for the same professional program together, all under Pat Riley, who kind of was in the same mix of that system. Not exactly, times had changed from obviously when Pat Riley played there compared to when those fellas had played there as well. But I just thought it was very interesting because when certain players go through the same type of programs, they pick up similar disciplines, similar practices that they carry with themselves throughout, the course of really their entire careers. And I think all three of those players, Bam, Cat, and Herro, all kind of know what to expect in terms of being successful, not just at the college level, but at the professional level. And I think having them gel together would create an unbelievable chemistry, especially because you'd have all three of them on the floor together at the same time, all playing for a former Kentucky Wildcat. So the University of Kentucky connection ultimately, I think, would be a really good option to kind of explore in the grand scheme of things in terms of, Miami maybe investing into some superstar power while having to give up a lot of assets. I mean, you're getting rid of Terry Rozier in the grand scheme of things, but the only asset that I think is really that Miami should be upset about losing in that trade is Andrew Wiggins. Yes, you are giving up a lot of draft capital, but there have been a lot of guys Miami has just invested in over the past couple of seasons that could fill in and become those rotational guys and kind of fill in the gaps. I'm not saying that, 3 or 4 players are going to make up for what Andrew Wiggins could, but it could definitely help bolster the entire roster to have a little bit more of a more successful run than maybe one player. So drop in the comments if you think the Wildcat connection there would definitely be worth Miami's time and hopefully would push them over the edge to maybe make a finals berth or even bring home a ring in that regard. But two other Wildcats that I thought were interesting, kind of looking at maybe this what-if scenario, if the Wildcat connection could really bolster Miami to getting to the next level. You can't really talk about, successful Kentucky Wildcats in the NBA with the exception of Anthony Davis, but we're not going to get into at least him being proposed to go there just because of his recent move to Dallas so far, pretty much being involved for trading the team's former centerpiece franchise player in Luka. So I don't think Anthony Davis is going to be on the trading block anytime soon. But I mean, hey, it's the NBA. I could totally be wrong about that. But what about Devin Booker? That was an interesting thought that I kind of thought to myself. Could he ever end up in Miami? Kind of also blending with the Wildcat connection. But I do think that if Miami was going to trade for him, they'd probably have to give up Tyler Herro. They probably have to give up another Wildcat in exchange for him. So I don't think it would be very likely that you'd be able to keep Booker and Herro in the same backcourt. Plus the amount of money that's still left on Booker's contract, if he were to come over the course of this next season, is arguably more money than what Miami would owe Tyler Herro now. So I don't think at this point in time that'd be super realistic. However, being a former Wildcat and quite honestly, arguably being a better player than Tyler Herro. I think Devin Booker could be a very interesting superstar type guard to mesh well with Bam Adebayo. So the Kentucky connection, I think, maybe would serve some benefits, but I think if you have to give up Herro, which is almost kind of a definite in that point, in that regard, unless you're doing a super mega haul and you're kind of flip-flopping Karl Anthony Towns kind of in a same deal like that, only it's Devin Booker instead of Karl Anthony Towns. I mean, maybe that's how you could possibly get it to work. And in that regard, Miami would still be able to rely on Bam and Khalil Ware to kind of hold it down in the front court. But I think that if you could find a way to keep Herro and also have Devin Booker in there, I think that backcourt would be absolutely just very, very strong. But the amount of money that Devin Booker is also looking at on his contract, Miami probably would have so little flexibility really financially to just make some moves in general. That would kind of be the final superstar Miami would not really have a choice in building around after over the course of the next couple of, or at least the next 2 years based on what's left on his contract. And then the deal he's eligible for is even more money than Tyler. So I don't think Pat Riley would jump on that opportunity so quickly, but just because, the Wildcat connection, I think it's definitely something Pat Riley could maybe consider going forward. But speaking of Quickley, Emmanuel Quickley was another Wildcat that I thought could also be an interesting trade for Miami to potentially look into. If Miami could pull this off without having to trade at least Tyler Herro, that could also be a good front court mix. Obviously, he's still owed quite a bit of money from the Toronto Raptors, at least at this point in time. So I think kind of in a similar regard to Devin Booker, it would all be about if Miami could, one, afford it, and two, really could really ultimately just afford to take the risk on investing in that in their backcourt, at least for the next couple of years. And because of how they've developed, some of their other guard players over the past couple of seasons, I just think that trade might be worth even less of a bang for its buck than Devin Booker, just because, Devin Booker, former Olympian, just coming off that gold medal win, just getting Phoenix in at least one finals appearance over the last 4 seasons. And just unfortunately, I think that if Quickley didn't have so much money left on his contract, that could potentially be a decent option. So maybe in 2 or 3 seasons when he's only got about $30-ish million left that he's still owed, I think could definitely be worth something to look into. But at this point in time right now, might not be so quick for Miami to jump on that trade or looking for an acquisition to add that Kentucky Wildcat to the court. Drop in the comments if you think any of those Kentucky Wildcat investments would add more to the team chemistry, kind of almost reminiscent of what we've seen with the New York Knicks kind of building a Villanova type of really just the Villanova team that kind of conquered and took names back in the NCAA when Jalen Brunson was leading the charge there. But, just watching how those guys have kind of played together over the last couple of seasons and just watching the Knicks kind of emerge into, the spotlight really from kind of the bottom of the East really. I just think that because Pat Riley's so excited about wanting to bring in players that have kind of gone through the same system and culture that he went through, at least in Kentucky, could definitely help maybe bolster some success in terms of what Miami's capabilities will be able to do going into the course of not just the regular season, but the postseason as well. Like we've seen, like I had kind of just mentioned, building chemistry like that amongst players that have gone through similar developmental programs like the University of Kentucky, and just their ability to breed guards and, players like Anthony Davis, Bam Adebayo, and Karl Anthony Towns. Just, it would be interesting to see those players kind of take the floor together. And I don't necessarily know at this point in time how they'd be able to get it done financially, but if they played their cards right, they were able to wait some of those deals out and could maybe find a way to get some of those guys there on like $30 to $40 million at least 1-year deals, then maybe they can make it happen. And I definitely think that those types of teams, whether you're adding Devin Booker or Emmanuel Quickley in that backcourt, especially if you don't have to give up Tyler Herro, could really be a scary, scary team in the East and could really conquer and take names at least. So drop in the comments if you think Miami would in any way, shape, or form be able to get a deal done for one of those 3 Wildcats. I definitely think in the grand scheme of things, it could definitely bolster Miami's overall chemistry and could maybe get them over the hump to winning that championship. But now moving over to some EuroBasket news. Nikola Jovic is headlining once again. He led Serbia to a win in the EuroBasket opener against Estonia on August 27th. And I mean, he's just been shooting crazy efficiently in these games. 18 points to go with 6 assists and 4 rebounds, but 6 for 8 from the field. And I believe less than 20 minutes of play once again. But the fact that he's been able to consistently keep this up, this I feel like is the third game that he scored over at least around 15 or more points in, shooting the ball well over 50%, and quite honestly leading, the national team in Serbia to really just a successful performance on the court. And it's just been, really at this point kind of a spectacle to really watch. I mean, if you're a Heat fan and you're watching Jovic, I mean, I was just watching some of the highlights from the game against Estonia, and he was kind of doing a little bit of everything, making some good passes, shooting the ball from beyond the arc very efficiently, making some easy buckets down low. Don't get me wrong, wasn't being a crazy bruiser, but I mean, he's a big guy. He was, using his size and physicality to make some tough baskets. And that's, I think, the stuff we want to see, at least from a guy like Jovic going into this upcoming season, because the front court really needs the help. And being a guy like that, I would say about 6'10", it's just it's a very, very exciting thing to see. I'm not surprised why Spoelstra is excited seeing him play in person overseas, probably in a environment a little bit different from Miami, but in that regard, I'm very excited to see how he's going to help that translate towards the course of this regular season, and I'm hoping that he can really be a starter caliber type player for Miami, just demonstrating this type of play going forward. Drop in the comments, once again, if you think this EuroBasket play we're seeing from Jovic is going to translate into this regular season, and if he'll really be a reliable guy in Miami's rotation, more so than he has been in seasons past. Well, that's going to do it for today's episode of Your Heat Latest here on FanArc. Don't forget to drop a like on this video and, of course, subscribe for great daily content pertaining to Miami Heat culture Monday through Friday right here. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great weekend. I'm Sam Shapiro. Take care.